Howdy, Phil, and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at John chapter 4, verses 31 and 32. But first, last time in John chapter 4. And there we have it. Here's a rubric, everything that we look for as we go through the text. Well, let's get started. En toi metaxu eroton auton hoi mathetai lagontes Rabbi, phage. Ho de epen autois ego brosin echo phagein ein hein humes uk oidate. That's as far as we're going to make it. We start with a prepositional phrase, which normally we'll skip to get to our verb, which we see here with eroton. We have an omega nu ending right there, and we have an eta at the beginning. The eta is going to tell us how we're supposed to interpret on. Now, normally when you see omega nu, you think it is a nominative singular masculine present participle. But in this case, we have the verb erotao, an alpha contract, and it starts with an epsilon. Since the epsilon is changed into an eta, we know that it is a past tense, so it can't be a participle. It has to still be in the indicative voice. And then, of course, as an alpha contract, the alpha is going to mix with the connecting vowel of the ending and create a different vowel entirely, or a diphthong, and that will often obscure which tense this is. Well, there's been no change to the stem in this. We have the augmenting vowel right here, so no change plus augmenting vowel means that we're still off of the present stem, and the most likely option is going to be imperfect. Now, sometimes the aorist doesn't change the stem at all, and I don't remember if that's the weak or the strong aorist. Yeah, that's something that I'll have to remind myself of at some point. But anyway, the vowel to which alpha has contracted is omicron, which then means we have the omicron nu ending, and therefore an imperfect tense verb. So this is could either be a third person plural or a first person singular. So we need to take a look ahead for our subject. Auton could work, but no, because the nu normally is not there for the neuter. But hoi mathetai with alpha iota, and especially this article right here, that has to be our nominative plural subject. So then that would mean on here is the omicron nu third person plural. All right, so it's the disciples were asking, and they're asking a direct object, which we have an omicron nu here for the accusative singular masculine. And then we can go to our prepositional phrase right here. Now, metaxu is, I believe, actually an adverb. So it's not going to be part of the prepositional phrase properly, at least as far as I can remember. So I'm going to put a sort of parent right here and a sort of parent, closed parent, that is right there. And n is, of course, taking the dative being of time and singular, and then we don't know whether it's neuter or masculine. Metaxu means meanwhile or meantime. So then we would have in the meanwhile, in the meantime. We don't have a pronoun here owning the disciples as we would normally see it. And then legontes, we have epsilon sigma here for the nominative plural off of the present stem, ont active participle. And of course, masculine to match the subject. Start quote marks, and then we have Rabbi, and I think we've seen Rabbi before, but the last time we would have seen it, if we did in fact see it, I think I would have just thrown it out there as what the meaning is. It's just rabbi is how we normally treat it in English, but what we really should do when we come across a word like this, and frankly, anytime that we come across a Semitic name, is we should ask ourselves, well, what does this actually mean? What does it mean to us? When we have something like Peter, we know that's Petros, which means just rock or pebble. It's pretty easy because that's from the Greek and it's closer to English. And we retain that in our cultural and historical knowledge. But rabbi, from Hebrew or Aramaic, is something that we've lost. So I took the time to look up what the probable Hebrew of it would be. And that's going to be this. Oh, imagine more of a curve right there. It comes from the noun rav, and rav means chief. And this form, of course, in Hebrew, I believe, would look like this. I wasn't able to confirm that looking through my lexicon, so it's an educated guess, if you will. We've got the root rav, but then we have the name of that symbol inside the bet, which I don't remember, and that turns it into a harder consonant and also doubles it. So instead of the sound that we have with this letter, with that dot in the middle of the letter, it actually becomes b, but it becomes two b's, hence the two b's in the Greek here and in the English. And then we have the hieraic yod, which is the iota right there. And what the hieraic yod does is that adds a possessive pronoun to it. So we have chief, but specifically the first common singular possessive pronoun on there. So it would be my chief, or we could say my rabbi, which is kind of redundant with the I in there again. Another option would, of course, be how the Latin translated magister, master, or teacher. All right. Hope that made some sense to you. Phage, we have epsilon right there off of the present stem, so that's going to be a second person singular. And just the singular epsilon from eu sansai. Probably write that down for you. These are the most common classical Greek imperative endings. So that's just a command. Vocative is what we would say here, though rabbi doesn't decline into Greek, since it doesn't have a special vocative form in the Hebrew either. And this just, of course, means eat. Taking a look at this apen, we have a end of the quotation. Ho, going to refer to the new subject, that being Jesus, nominative, singular, and masculine. But he, apen, we've seen this one before, don't need to parse it again. Likewise for autois, that's just a dative plural indirect object. We have our first person and singular personal emphatic pronoun, as we already have in that omega right there. Our subject, don't need to parse that any further, it's pretty clear. I, myself, have, and then we want to look for our direct object, which could be brosin with that iota nu there. And iota nu is sometimes an accusative singular, especially when we have a third declension noun, which is bro, I think, cis in the nominative, and it is singular and feminine in form. But taking a look ahead, we have phagain, epsilon iota nu, and this is going to be the contracted epsilon. Yeah. You'd think, having talked about this only a few videos ago, I would remember, but then it's been months. Sorry, but anyway, this is the present active infinitive, and infinitives, of course, are either nominative or accusative nouns in how they work in the language. So echo could be taking a phagain as its object, and then phagain in turn could be taking brosin. I have to eat brosin, food, comestibles, things like that. But that's a bit awkward in English, and I think also a bit awkward in Greek, I think the idea here is actually this infinitive is showing the purpose of the direct object of echo. I have food in order to eat. Something along those lines. Though normally that would be shown by a articular infinitive, I believe, for the infinitive of purpose. So I'm just going to translate it with brosine before phagain for ease. As I said, food, comestibles, and of course, accusative, which doesn't need that C. And then hain, because we have that aspiration mark, we know that this is actually going to be a accusative, singular, feminine, relative pronoun, referring back to brosine. This brosine is, of course, feminine there too. Which, humes, epsilon iota sigma for our nominative plural. Negative, oidate, of course, have our te ending for the second person plural of the perfect, though present, meaning stem, active and indicative, which you, unnecessary pronoun, therefore emphatic, yourselves do not know, period. Elegon, this is not going to be a first person, or it could be a first person singular, except that we have mathetai again. So our quote ends here. We have epsilon, leg as our present stem, on as the ending is going to be the same thing as eroton. So then another imperfect. I'm going to draw that down. Therefore, hoi mathetai, I've already parsed that above. Then we have our prepositional phrase right here, pros alleus, and me, tain, and nenken ends the prepositional phrase, because of course a negative can't be part of the prepositional phrase unless there were a participle in it. But that would be strange. Very, very strange. So omicron, upsilon, sigma tells us, confirms really for us that pros is taking accusative, and this is plural and masculine, referring to mathetai. So we could say to themselves, or really among themselves would be the idea. Or to one another. Though another, of course, is singular in English. Then we enter quote marks here. Me, tis. With these two together, this means we probably have a question, and the editors think with this semicolon that there is supposed to be a question here. And then that would mean that may is going to be the type of question that expects a negative as the answer. So we'll need to pause until we know all of what's going on before we try to put it into English properly. Phrygius Calamitus has woken up. Very sorry about that. So tis. Tis here is either the masculine or feminine, and it's going to be the nominative singular. A nenken, we have epsilon nu right there, and eta, which looks like a augmented vowel. So then, with the kappa, we would normally expect this to be a perfect tense, but remember that there are a number of Greek verbs, like one I think we saw either last page or the page before, where the aorist stem actually does have a kappa in it, and it's the perfect stem where there's a change to it. And I don't remember what the perfect stem for this is, but no, it's just a third person singular aorist tense. And then looking ahead, autoi, subiota right there for the indirect object, and then phagain, which we saw up here for our present active infinitive. And I just realized we were supposed to stop at the end of 32. Well, I've already made it this far. Might as well just finish the entire page. Sorry, this is going to be a long one. You'll have probably seen a note I will have in the future left to note that. Oops. Anyway, so we have eneng ken. This is from Pharaoh, oiso eneng kon. And then again, I don't remember what the perfect tense is, but it just means to bring, to carry, to bear, to ferry. And then tis is indefinite. So someone may. Has someone brought him to eat? Well, that would be without expectation of a negative in response. So we might say, someone hasn't brought him something to eat, have they? And really, phrasing it that way, you'd have to have the tone. You have to be able to hear it to get the negative expected in that. I always have trouble formulating these things, but I'm going to try it that way first. And then we have to supply the word something, because it's not in the Greek, it's just implied. And we might say T inserted right there. And then, of course, with this second one, the implied after this would be, have they? No. Lege, so close quote right there in our doubly long video. We don't need to parse this. We've seen it too many times before. Likewise, autois and ho Jesus. Quote starts here. Amon broma estin. There is our verb. We've seen this one before with the movable nu. No need to parse it. Amon with that omicron nu just confirms for us that broma is a neuter, especially with that alpha, and estin tells us that it's going to be nominative. So nominative singular neuter. And note the difference between broma and brosin. We've got brosis in the nominative, and we just got broma for this one. So he's using two different words for eating, and I can't distinguish a meaning difference between them, but there is a reason why John has included two different words. And one of the things behind that would be just confirmation that this is him directly quoting what was actually said at the time, because if you were making up a story, why wouldn't you use the same word over and over again, for especially so close to each other? Only in actual conversation, actual dialogue, do we have such odd variation rather than consistency. But yeah, broma just means food. And then, of course, amon is a possessive pronoun, possessive adjective, so it matches the noun it's owning. And then we've got hina to introduce a purpose clause or something like that. Sometimes hina, as I think I mentioned previously, will introduce a statement. I think it's a direct statement. So, my food is in order that... Poieso, omega there for the ending, so we know first person singular, no augmenting vowel, changed the stem, so we have the two options. We have either a future tense, active, indicative, or we have an aorist tense, also active, but subjunctive. All right, so with hina, we want a subjunctive, so aorist is the more likely than the future, and I can't actually think of a reason why we would have the future with a hina clause, so aorist is what I'm going to go for here. Now, if you remember something where future goes with hina, I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, in these types of clause, we normally translate a past tense like the aorist as a present tense. It works the same way often in Latin too, and for that, I think it's even this exact clause in Latin where we would do that. In order that I do to thelema, alpha right there, to is our neuter form of ho he to, so accusative singular neuter, to omicron upsilon, and pempsantos, omicron sigma right there with nu tau for our participial ending, this being genitive singular. And it could be masculine or a neuter. But since we know that this is going to be talking about the father, it's going to be masculine. And we know because of the greater context of John. And of course, pimps with that C right there and the change in the stem from pimpo to pimpso for future to a pimpsa for the aorist. Aorist participle. Active is the new tau, of course, and part. And then this one's a direct object, which we see right before our connecting conjunction, which would be an accusative singular first person pronoun, me, or to do the will of the having sent, which is a bit weird in English, but I think I do this version a lot, or have in years by now previously. And tel oso, got omega right there for the first person singular ending again. We have sigma and omega right here again, which then means that this is going to be just a repetition of the form of poieso, still in this hina clause. So first person singular, aorist, though future was another option, active, and subjunctive. And then teleoso is an Aristotelian word, if you will. It comes from the telos, is what we say in English. And a telos is an end or a completion, a consummation, the ultimate purpose of something. So Jesus is saying here, and that I bring to completion, I bring to the end, I consummate whatever it is that he's doing. But we need the rest of the context of that. So autou, omicron upsilon for the genitive singular, and again it's going to be in reference to the father, so that's going to be masculine. To with ergon, omicron nu for the accusative, because we already have our subject in teleoso. Still don't need that C, sorry, too much time in Latin. And singular and neuter. In form we know neutered because of to, and ideally we would have this word memorized. And that, I'm going to repeat it for clarity. And there we have it. Extra long video. I'm not going to go through and read it in its own context. I hope you have a very good day, and thank you very much for joining me. Farewell.